Hello class, today we're going to look at App 13, the use of complex conditions. Before we get into it, I want to talk about Challenge 4. Challenge 4 is going to be way more simpler than Challenge 3. It will involve creating a single view controller which will ask the user for their height in meters and their weight in kilograms, and will calculate through a constant or variable this formula. So weight divided by height squared. And that's called body mass index. And the calculator will then, through a label or something, will display the user's BMI, your BMI is, and using if statements will indicate whether, if it's between 18.5 and 24.9, whether their corporal composition is normal, greater than normal, less than normal, or in an obese range. So you can start practicing and creating your own calculator beforehand, so when you get to the test you're gonna be way more prepared, and you just have to recreate your calculator on the go really quickly, and that's it. So what are complex conditions? So complex conditions is just adding another level of complexity, to if statements. So you can add and or joined words. So when adding an and, in this example, if I pass all my courses and my average is higher than 90, then I will go to vacation. So these two conditions have to be met before passing to the then part of the statement. So you have to pass all your courses and your average has to be greater than 90. So if one condition is false, then they're both false in a sense. The or is the opposite. Just one of the n conditions has to be true in order to go on to the next part of the code. So if I pass all my courses or my average is higher than 90, then I will go to vacation. So in this instance, you can have an average of 90 or greater and still be failing a course, and you will go to vacation. So this table just really summarizes it all. You require the two statements to be true in order to go on with the next part of the if-else statement, if-then-else statement. And in an or, you just require one of the two statements to be true. So how do you put them? In the and, you just have to add two ampersands. So failed classes equals 0 and final average greater than 90. While in the or, you're going to add these two symbols, which are called pipes, and you can add them using Alt-1 in the Spanish keyboard on the Mac computer. And so this is just saying an or. If one of these two are met, then vacations. There's also the not condition. We're not really going to use it, so you don't really have to focus on it, but if the initial condition is true, then the denied condition will be false. So it's just, instead of saying if this is equal to this, you will then say if this is not equal to this, in a sense. And we're also going to look at the new object called switch, which has two states, on and off, and in Boolean would be true or false. You can change its tint and its default state on the interface part of Xcode. So we're going to move on to App 13. App 13 is going to be 3 exercises in a single Xcode project. And the first exercise will be in the presentation S19, located in the course under Swift Partial 2. And the other 2 exercises will be in S20, and we're going to look at later. So I've taken the liberty of adding all the objects necessary, but I have not coded or connected any of the objects. So what I added here was a title as a label, 3 labels for just telling the user what to input here, 2 text fields, 1 switch. The switch, you just have to look for it here and click and drag. Here are 2 labels as well where we don't have to connect these, another label, and a blank label that will display vacations or no vacations depending on the results. Finally, a button. I have also 2 buttons that will take me to the next 2 exercises, which I have also already added the objects and we'll look at later. So we can go ahead and start connecting our objects. I'm going to name this txt final grade has an outlet. This one I'm going to name txt failed classes. This one I'm going to name SWI, symbolizing that it's a switch. Name it athlete. This empty label, which will be label result, I'm going to name it label vacation. And finally our calculate button, which I'm going to name BATN vacations. Oops, I have an error there. I added it as a outlet, so I have to delete this last one. And right click on my button, scroll down and close the connection with that thing we just created. So we're going to reconnect it, but now as a action UI button. I'm going to start off by creating two constants that will hold the information of whatever the user inputted in the two text fields. So I'm going to name this first one, let final grade equal to the integer of whatever the user inputted in txt final grade dot text, and remember always adding your exclamation marks. But do the same for failed classes. Great. And we're not going to use constant to hold whatever information is here, because we're going to put them straight into the straight into the if statement. So we can ignore these two errors. They're just yellow errors. They're just, what they're saying is that we haven't used these two constants before, and it's just warning us. We can skip those. Now, so what I'm going to try to say here is that if I have a final grade of 60 and I'm failing like 6 classes, but I'm a high performance athlete, I will still be able to go on vacations, because those people have benefits in some universities or high schools. However, if I'm not a high performance athlete, then these two will be an or. So if my final grade is greater than 90, or I failed 0 classes, then I'll go to vacations. So I'm going to write the 3 conditions. So if final grade is greater than 90, or alt 1, failed classes 0, then vacations. However, I want to add in the same if statement the part about high performance athletes. So I'm going to add and SWI sports, SWI, what did I name it? SWI athlete, sorry. I'm going to put is on. So period is on is just referring to that if that switch is on. I have an error here. Oh, it's just asking me to add my bracket at the end. However, I need to add a parenthesis between these two conditions, these first ones, because I want to say that if switch athlete is on, then I'll go to vacation. If it's off and one of these two conditions are not met, oh no, both conditions are not met, then I will not go to vacation. So in this case, for an example, my final grade is greater than 90, check. I have 1 failing class, but this is an or, so that's a check. And switch athlete is on, then vacations. No, this has to be as well an or. So one of these 3 have to be met regardless, so we don't really require the parentheses. So one of these, any amount of these has to be required. Doesn't matter which ones. So if that happens, then I'm going to change label vacations.text equal to vacations. Else no vacations. And that's it. It's pretty simple. Pretty simple stuff. What I'm just missing here, I just have to create my control click and drag connections to show the next view controller. I don't have to create any connections. It's just, they're called segues. So I control click and drag to the next view controller to show. Okay. Finally, I'm just going to add after the class a comment saying that this is exercise 1, because we're going to do the other exercises in the same view controller and it could get messy. So this is exercise 2 and below will be exercise 3. Let's move on to exercise 2. If I go to S20, exercise 1 here is going to be exercise 2. It doesn't matter, it's just how it's ordered, and I really don't want you to do exercise 3. I think it's kind of complicated, and I really don't want you getting mixed up with those tricky if and or statements. So exercise 2, it's an absence calculator. So what this is telling us is that students have by default 2 weeks absence, but if one of these conditions are met, either one, then you'll have 3 weeks of absences. So this is going to be a bunch of ors, no ands. Finally, if the user is enrolled in a sports team or his average is greater than 85, then a label will tell him or her that he or she is eligible for the life award, whatever that is. So we're going to ask the user his or her average and in a text field, and the others will be used to switch. So you can have a default on or off, whatever you'd like. So I've just added my labels as always. Just a bunch of labels, switches, a text field here for the final grade. Finally, one result label for how many absences they're going to have, and one label that will read out that they're a candidate for the life award if they have an average greater than 87, I believe, 85, and they're in one of these two. Okay, let's start creating our connections. So I'm going to name this final grade. However, we named that, txt final grade. However, we already used that, and we cannot use it once again because the computer will get mixed up with what are we trying to define. So I'm going to name it txt final grade 2. This switch, I'm going to name SWE Sports, and it's going to be an outlet as well. SWE Extra. SWE Robo, maybe. This label, let's name it LBL Absences. And this one LBL Award. Finally, our button. I'm going to name BTN Absences Action UI Button. Great. So as before, I have to create a constant to hold the integer of whatever the user inputted here. So I'm going to call this let final grade 2 equal to the integer of txt final grade 2 dot text with exclamation marks. And we can start our if final grade is greater than, I think it was 83, yep, or SWE Sports dot is on, or SWE Extra dot is on, or SWE Athlete, nope, SWE Robo dot is on, then we're going to change label absences dot text equal to 3. However, if we just leave it like that, we're going to get an error. Wait for it. There we go. It's saying that we cannot assign a value of integer into a string. Since this is a string, we have to convert this one as well to a string. So we're going to put string parentheses parentheses. And what are we having? Oh, final grade. There we go. Else, if nothing is true in these conditions, then they're going to have the default of 2. We also require the if for the life award. So we're going to put it as if grade, final grade 2, A2 is greater than, I believe, 85. And he is involved in extracurricular activities or sports team. So, am I correct? The student is a candidate if he is involved in an extracurricular activity or a sports team and his average. Yeah, that is correct. And now I'm going to use some parentheses because this has to be true, and one of the next two, one of them has to be true, just at least one. So the next ones are going to be sweet extra dot is on pipe or sweet sports is on. Then open brackets, then label award dot text will read out you candidate to the life award. And we don't really want to splur out you're not a candidate to the life award, so we don't need an else statement here. That's about it. And there we go. We can move on now to exercise 3. Exercise 3 is the exercise 2 in the presentation called session 20. And it's just going to be a calculator to get the final grade of a student following different scenarios. So I added here 3 text fields, so the user will add their partial 1 grade, their partial 2 grade, and their final exam grade. Here's going to be an empty label, which is going to splur out their final grade after many if statements and just a button. So we can start by adding our connections as always. Let's call this partial 1 grade. Oops, it's a txt. Txt partial 1. Let's call that, yeah, as an outlet. This one, we'll call it txt partial 2 as an outlet. And txt final grade, we've already used that. So we can name it txt final grade 3 maybe. Our final grade label we can name label final grade 3. And our button final grade 3 UI button. Before I forget, I didn't connect these buttons, segue them to their respective exercises. I'm going to do this right now. Great. Now, inside our button, we're going to do the same as always. Let partial 1, yep, equal to the integer. However, since we're going to be getting averages, dividing subtracting, we're going to use decimal points. Our final grade will require decimal points. So if you get a 70 plus a 80, you will add them up and divide it by 2, which will give you, in some occasions, decimal points. So we're, instead of using an integer, we're going to use a double, which is like an integer, but you get decimal points. So the double, I want whatever the user inputted here as a double, so with decimal points. So txt partial 1 dot text let partial 2 equal double txt partial 2 dot text, and let final exam, or what did I name it? I think I named it final grade. Whoops. Yeah, I want to change the name of this one. It's not final grade, it's final exam. So I'm going to delete it, right click on the object, close the connection, and reconnect it. I'm gonna name this txt final exam. That's something more suitable. Double as well. Great. Now we can start with our if. So let's go back here. Okay, so first we have to get the final grade, which is adding the two partials and the exam with weighted averages. So 40, so partials 1 and 2 have a weight of 60% and final exam has a weight of 40. So I'm going to create a variable. Why am I not creating a constant? Because I'm going to be changing this variable, which I'm going to call final score, depending on the if statements. It's going to be changeable. Constants, they're going to be the same once we give them a value. So var final score will be equal to partial 1 0.3 times partial 1 plus, I'm going to do this, it's the same for partial 2, so I'm just copying and paste it, and 0.4 for final exam. Great. Now in our if final grade is failing but the student passed both partial grades, the final grade will be the average of both partials. So that teacher is really thoughtful and good, because if you really dunk the final exam but you did good on both partial grades, then he'll disregard the final exam, and your final grade will be the average of your both partials. So let's try and how to put that in an if. So if final score is less than 70, that's the first part, failing, and partial 1 is greater than 70, so he did not, greater than or equal to 70, because 70 is a passing grade. It's less than 70 and partial 1 is greater than or equal to 70, and partial 2 is greater than or equal to 70. Okay, so what we're saying here, if he flunked the final score or your final grade, whatever you'd like to call it, but he passed partial 1 and partial 2, then his final score will be equal to, we can change it because it's a variable, it will be equal to the average of partial 1 and partial 2. So partial 1 plus partial 2 divided by 2. Great. So this is the first condition out of quite a few bullets. So instead of using an else, which we can only use once, I'm going to use an else if, which allows me to put n amounts of conditions inside an if statement. So if this condition isn't met, it will move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So else if the next condition, so if their final score or the final grade, whatever, I didn't like now this name for this variable, we have to stick to it now. If that final score is failing, but the exam grade is greater than 85, then the final grade will be the grade of the final exam. So if you've been failing class because of your partials, but you did good in your final exam, that teacher will just disregard your whole semester and put your final grade as whatever you did in the however you did in the final exam. So that's pretty cool. So if final score is less than 70 and your final exam is greater than 85, then greater than 85, the grade will be of the final exam. So final score equals final exam. Okay. Else if, another if statement there. In any other situation, the final grade is failing grade, that will stay the same. Okay. If the final grade is greater than 90, then add 2 points to the final grade. So that's like a bonus. That one's easy. So if final score is greater than 90, is that correct? Greater than 90, then open parentheses, brackets, close brackets, then final score will be equal to final score, which in this example, let's say it's 91 plus 2 in here. So final score at the end will be equal to, if it were 91, it will be equal to 93. And finally, if final grade is passing grade but less than or equal to 90, the grade stays the same, okay, logically. So it's just going to be 3 conditionals. That closes that, and this one closes this button. Okay, so I think we're kind of done. What else are we missing? Oh, we haven't changed the label for the final grade. So we can do that at the end. So one of these conditions are going to be met. If none of these conditions are met, then final score will stay as this. So we could change the label final grade 3 dot text equal to final score as a string. And we can start checking out our application. Okay, starting with exercise 1. So let's say I just really tank the whole semester and I get a 50 here. And I fail 4 classes, but I'm a high performance athlete. You click and drag the switch on, then I get vacations. Great. If I get a 90, I'm not an athlete, but I failed 1 class, I do not get vacations because we are using an and on these, right? Correct? Okay, we're using with or B final grade and so no vacations. We have a final grade greater than 90 or okay, let me change this to 0. We get vacations. We change this to 1. Oh, there we go. I don't know what happened there. Vacations, there we go. Great. Let's move on to exercise 2. Absences. So my final grade is equal to 89, let's say, and I'm part of the extracurricular activity. I'm going to click calculate. Ooh, and I get 3 weeks, and I'm a candidate of the Life Award. Great. So you can still move around. Let's say I get a 70, and I'm not part of anything, so I'm going to get 2. So we can maybe add in our code that label award.text at the start here at the button. Let's change label award.text will be equal to blank at the start. So we get like a new fresh part when we are trying to put more information. But that works great so far. Finally, exercise 3. Let's input something predictable, 80, 90, 90. Okay, yeah. So we get 90, 90, 90, or 95, 95, 95. You'd think our average would be 95, but it's 95 plus 2 because of the 2 bonus points. And let's say we flunk here, but we get a 90. Our average will be the final exam grade. And what was the other condition? Oh, label award, use of unresolved identifier LBL award. Ooh, did I name it life? I think I did. Wait a second. Yeah, I was using the wrong Xcode file. So what we were changing is here. Start of the button. You're gonna change label award dot text will be equal to blank text. Yeah. Finally, exercise 3. The last condition is referring to if you get a partial, if your final score is less than 70, but partial 1 and partial 2 you pass, then it will be the average of partial 1 and partial 2. So if I put 90 and 90 and I flunk the final grade, I get a 40. My average, okay. Ooh, wait a second. Yeah, so what happened there is the average of 90, 90, and 40, I think is 70. So that's why I was getting that. But if you get you pass your grade on partial 1 and partial 2, and you flunk and you flunk your final grade, not your final exam grade, then your final grade will be the average of these two. So that's pretty weird form of grading, but I guess that's how that teacher does it. So, and that's about it. You can try and adding new conditions, new text fields for these exercises, but they will really help you for your challenge 4 and for the remainder of the semester. Hope you liked it. See you on Wednesday.